there's so much going on that it seems like every hour, it's no longer every day, it's every hour something new and something very, very dangerous is happening. And for the record, people of the world who listen to this broadcast, this is full-scale weather war underway. Remember this, the whole plan. If you don't believe that, go look up weather. We own the Weather 2025 Air Force study. But what's happening now is it's all coming at once. This is not just a single or individual circumstance, i.e. the floods in California, i.e. the snowpack, i.e. all of the earthquakes in Turkey, i.e. all of the earthquakes simultaneously erupting all over the world, spewing voluminous amounts of ash in the upper atmosphere that's going to affect the growing season, just like it did in 1815, 1816 when Tambora went off. And tonight, Ross and I are going to cover as much ground as we can. And the brief amount of time that we have, we're on for an hour, and may God help us to redeem this time. And the thing that I think everybody has to understand, watching what's going on in Oroville, whenever you watch someplace else going under this type of severe threat and displacement and the upheaval in people's lives, and we watched it in the Branson, the Tennessee, Dollywood, that whole area in Gatlinburg, as long as it doesn't touch us, we can feel sorry for people. That's not what our attitude is to be. Our attitude is to be prayerfully, and I would say this, believing in faith, interjecting our hearts for our countrymen. And as Ross and I go on the air tonight, we are under a full-scale internal communist plot. The former entity in the slaughterhouse is commanding 32,000 internal terrorists to confront the new president-elect. Donald Trump is surrounded by enemies. He's surrounded by even stealth appointees of the Obama administration that do not stand out like a sore thumb. The people that he trusts the most, a lot of people have said, don't go with this guy, don't go with this guy, don't go with this guy or that lady. The thing is, we need to pray, as I said, that God is using Donald Trump as a prosecuting attorney. And I've been read over the Riot Act, by my standpoint, and I won't back down. For those of you that think that God is not capable of turning the hearts of the kings or the President of the United States, think again. God responded, but Doug, we won that battle, but now the war is on. And never in the history of the United States has there been so much treason within the branches of the military, the intelligence, the political, and the Senate, and the Congress. So we are in let's just say this, a slaughterhouse stockyard pile of dung hitting every fan and the dung pile being hit by 1,000-mile-per-hour winds, spreading it to the four corners of the earth. And people had better purpose in their heart tonight that the last thing they want to do is become a victim when they can be a victor if they'll act. And the last thing they want to do is be a refugee. Again, I'm getting inundated as we're on the radio tonight, Doug and Ross and Joe, with people saying, well, my kids live in Oroville or whatever, what should I do? Well, the thing that I can only share with you is at this point, pray and believe. I even have one guy whose wife just sent me an email stating that the woman gets what's going on, very bright, one of my listeners, and she's trying to tell her husband that, hey, the coast is getting really tough. I think they live inland California, and he wants to move to the beach. Do we be with his kids? So, brother, I'm telling you this. That's why I asked Ross. I said, Ross, I'm turning over to him right now. This is your night to be unchained because, listen, we are undergoing a full-scale internal communist assault. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I'll let Ross explain to you in no uncertain terms what the left is doing to prepare while everybody kind of sits dumbfoundedly as deer in a million headlights coming their way. Go ahead, Ross.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Doug and Joe, for having me on. Yeah, it's a busy time, and as you were speaking, Steve, it made me think about the birth pangs are getting closer and closer. I think things are happening at a more rapid pace, and it's not just because we have more news. They're just more things that are happening. And what I think the key thing I want to touch on is we have a former president who is borderline committing sedition and treason, And the reason I say that is he's 2 miles from the White House, bunkered up, and he's building a house with a 6-foot wall around it. He's got, you mentioned, 32,000 professional agitators. He's bulwarked with $40 million from Soros and the other leftists like that. There's something in my twilight zone. We have a president that's an ex-president that is saying, "Go on with your protests," and he pays agitators and has all this money, the $40 million in his wheelhouse to deal with it. And a lot of people are doing it for free. So you have 32,000 useful idiots, along with all of their suffragans that are following them. The thing that's even more concerning, just as that, because we know who the enemy is, but you also have preparations going on behind the scenes with the rank and file left, the usual people that are upset about whatever Trump does or their Hillary supporters. But now they're creating fight clubs for leftists to learn how to beat up Republicans. So before they would talk and say we need to be tolerant, now they're finding ways to teach people how to fight and beat them up. So they get into a fight at a demonstration to teach them how to fight. The left is also having their own prepper movement. Our prepping movement is completely asleep. When we thought Hillary was going to win, it was arches and elbows, and everybody was getting all their preps done. And suddenly Trump wins, and somehow it's some panacea that he's going to solve all the problems that existed before the election are still there, and including something where we just collected the most tax ever in our history of the United States, and we still have a large deficit. So we're collecting more and more tax, going into deeper, deeper debt. So nothing's changed. And you have leftists learning how to shoot, but getting their food, getting their bug out locations, banding together in communities so that they can continue this fight long term, because they will never stop. And you're listening audience, they will never stop. You can arrest the professional agitators, but once you get millions of people involved, they're not going to stop until they get their way. They don't follow the rules. The ends justify the means, and sometimes the means justify the means. So they are just getting, the only way to stop them is to stop their ability to resist, stop their ability to doing what they're doing. And most times in legal ways you can do it, but our people need to stand up, get their preparations going, and wake up again, because this is a war. As Steve was saying, we're at war for our lifestyle, for our culture. I'm just waiting for the next Fort shot at Fort Sumter, and it could be all over the country. It's just, we're right below the surface. And I ask your audience to be self-reflective tonight, before I get into even more facts, is to look around and does everything feel right to you? Do you think everything is moving in the right direction with Trump as president? Can you talk about supporting Trump as the president in open conversations around the watering hole at your office or in the grocery store? Do you feel self-conscious about talking about it? You're afraid you're going to offend your family still. So the election's been over 3 months, and there's still a war is going on, and it's deepening. So these kind of things, and that's just one aspect of it. That's just the social piece of this, the political realm. And you have people inside the Congress who say we're going to repeal Obamacare, and now all over the headlines on the mainstream media, all the Republicans are in disarray. But the state houses are getting their ducks in a row. So Washington is still dysfunctional. You have establishment people still trying to run the show. You have other people fighting against that. So it's 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, maybe 1 step forward, 2 steps back any given day. And so it's a constant barrage against our president and our lifestyle. But that's just the social political realm. And I don't want to go on and on and on. Let's see what you guys jump in. But let's just talk about the economics of everything that's going on. Nothing's changed. We still have $20 trillion worth of debt and growing. The market blew off the top again today, another 100 and something points. We're 20,460. Soon we'll be at 21,000. And so I started looking at P&E ratios, which is price to earning ratio. Nobody knows anything about the stock market, but your stock price is based on your earnings, and historically have been in the 9 to 15 range. The S&P, which is a broader index than say the Dow, it's much more broad across a bunch of different industries. In the heyday of 2008, when the crash happened, the PE ratio was 21.46, which is 7 points, or 50% higher than it was on average, about 14.65 over the previous 20, 30 years. Today, as of the close of business today, the S&P P&E ratio is 26.48. The same time last year, it was 22.18. So we're just constantly pumping up and pumping up and pumping up this balloon, And everybody's got this irrational exuberance saying, well, it's the Trump rally. The Trump rally is going to change all these rules. No, it's called the Federal Reserve. It's called the central banks around the world. It's all pumping up and buying stocks. Many of the central banks now have the authority, especially in Europe, to buy stocks. So then you have Japan buying big bulk of our stocks. Then you have our central bank doing it. We have trillions of dollars in slush funds that they put into place after the economic meltdown in 2008. So they can pump this up all day long. But it doesn't change the fact that the financials and everything else don't match the number. So whenever you get this skewed way out of proportion, something's going to have to give and something's going to pop. And then you leverage that, or you look at that, and again, my intelligence background doesn't just take one vector or two vectors. They take dozens of vectors and all of being stories, and you build a cross-section to get down to a bullseye. And now you have all these countries that are buying the debt, or have been, stepping out of the treasury market. They don't want to get into this $13 trillion deal. They're trying to get out of it. And so they're all threatening to sell. Japan has sold a bunch. China sold a bunch. Russia sold a bunch. So our debt is getting bought by our own central banks. So you're just creating this fiat circle, and you can't keep pumping up a balloon and going bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, it's going to pop, and when that pop is that's going to get all over everybody. So let's put it in context of this dam in California. I used to be in the insurance industry as a business analyst for Hartford Insurance for 11 years. I did a lot of numbers. I did forecasting on premiums, forecasting on losses in claims. I worked at Hurricane Andrew back in the day, setting up IT stuff for them. So let's put this in perspective. If that dam breaks and it washes all the way down to Sacramento and 1 million people get displaced, those are homes valued in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. All those insurance claims based on that flooding, which is an act that potentially could be declined because it can be considered an act of God. But let's say that they choose to pay those claims or forced to. Those trillions and trillions of dollars that the insurance companies would have to pay out have to come from somewhere. So you can see insurance companies going bankrupt, so everybody's not going to get paid, and those houses don't get rebuilt. And if they do get paid, they have to liquidate all of their assets that are in the market. Trillions of dollars in the market. So what does that do to the stock market? Boom, it wipes it out. So not only will we have a human disaster if this thing happens in California, we're going to have an economic disaster the size we've never seen before, because you can't take that much money out of the system to pay claims to everybody else. The government's going to have to step in. We may have to have, who knows, a whole other work program for all the unemployed to rebuild houses in California. So, and this is not hyperbole here. This is a true fact. When I worked and paid claims with Hartford, you have called a catastrophe, and you had to be liquidated all kinds of positions in the market and cashed in, called in bonds, called in all kinds of things to raise cash in order to pay those claims. So when you get your car bumper fixed from a fender bender, that money has to come from somewhere. But that's not the size of what we're talking about. It could wipe out the entire insurance industry. I can tell you to a T that the folks in Hartford, all the insurance companies in Hartford, in the Midwest, Farmers, State Farm, all those are looking at that with great worry, and I'm sure their positions to sell are already queued up in the event of that thing breaking.
Ross,
this is nothing in this.
Is that not shared risk, but reinsurance? Is that what it's called when you've got one insurance company spreading the risk over multiple companies, but without?
Right. I mean, right. But they have reinsurance over some large risks. I mean, individual risk you'll go to reinsurance. But at a certain point in a catastrophe, they may have some reinsurance over $5 million, $10 million, $1 billion or whatever. But then that goes and causes a contagion across Europe. So let's say you have Lloyd's of London or these other reinsurers. That brings down the European market.
Exactly.
So the entire world economy could collapse just because of this dam breaking. Because anybody that lives in California, even in that area, knows exactly how much those houses cost. Anybody that's ever visited there gets sticker shock on how much those houses cost. And to rebuild them and all that market cap is just, it's staggering. So if the market goes south, who's going to be left holding the bag? Who's going to be left standing and doing well are those that have hard assets, not the ones on the ground underwater in California, but those who have hard metals. They have food, they have water, they have things that are going to keep them alive. It's subsistence living. So you just think about that. If you don't have water right now in California, and let's say you're not even in an effective area, it could still hit you. If you don't have 3 in your house, you need to get some more. So all of these things you need to get prepared, and it's not just because of the world is unraveling, which it is, but more so if this thing passes by and hopefully our prayers are answered and God graces us again and this dam does not fail and we live to carry on, that'll be a wonderful thing, and all prayers go out for that. Let's hope so. But if it doesn't, then everybody needs to be prepared for what's going to be coming ahead. So I just would like to take a break there for a second, Steve. Anything that I missed, Steve? I'm thinking this is pretty strong.
Sure, and I want to deal with Doug's. Yeah, Doug, your question is they also have cross-collateralized holdings. I'll run through some of the biggest insurers in the world, and these will be familiar to you, Ross. AXA or AXA, 102 million customers, 56 countries. Zurich Insurance Group, China Life Insurance Group, Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's outfit, Prudential, PLC, United Health Group, Munich Re. Now, I would recommend people pay attention to Munich Re. Some people pronounce it Munich Re, because they're the ones that basically do the yearly forecast of how much damage is going to be probably presented to the insurance underwriters around the world. And so when you're dealing with a $1 trillion issue and you've got assets of 509 billion pounds, let's say about $700 billion, what people only look at is the initial claim. And the initial claim has what I would say cascading multiple demands on a single asset. I'll give you a good example. We're dealing right now with what's obviously going on in California, the potential claims in the Sacramento Valley, all of the different people that are in harm's way. Yet there's very few people talking about the amount of damage that was done in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and the whole Tennessee forest fires. And there's very few people talking about and I'll say this, the actual costs of Fukushima in the loss of not only fishing and not only, quote, the sporting revenue, but the sheer loss of marine mammals. Now, Doug, I want to share this about Fukushima. I started screaming like others, and the greatest cover-up in history and the greatest cover-over in mass death and a truly horrific series of events is taking place in Fukushima. When I got my start, real quick, 1-minute story in the whole survival preparedness business, it was based around nuclear weapons, nuclear protection, i.e. the different areas of civil defense, national defense, and basically what civil defense actually becomes a very important function of your War Department. China and Russia built on that foundation, as well as Switzerland, Sweden, some other countries in Europe. But to a large extent, the United States has zero, nada, niet, nothing, and in civil defense. So what I'm really puzzled by is this. I have yet to see anybody take the calamities that are happening, and floods, for the record, Russ would tell you this too, floods take the greatest toll on insurance companies for damage, actual cash damage. Now, there are exceptions rarely, but there are rare exceptions. But how would you calculate the loss of global farming for a year? Well, I can do what I call quick and the light, or, I used to call it quick and dirty. I changed it to quick and the light. You can go and see what the 56 or 106, whatever amount of countries you want to do, their gross agricultural revenue and their net exports. Following with me, Doug? Joe? Ross?
Oh, yeah.
Of course you're following this.
Of course.
And you can basically see, you can project in there a 25% decrease, a 50% decrease, 75%, or 100%. And the 100% did happen in history, after Mount Tambora went off in Indonesia, and it was 1816, I think, that there was just no summer. So the growing season's effective. Now, and those of you who are computer geniuses, do the math and for me, please, and send me the results. I really will appreciate it. The bottom line is, and it'll be helping everybody, if you grasp the amount of infrastructure necessary just to repair the communities in the United States that are drinking basically, and I'll call it, I'm sorry if this offends everybody, then wake up. There are a lot of people that need to get slapped in the face, but the literal urine poor, I'll change it from the P word, urine poor conditions of the water where physical human urine and animal urine is more sterile than the water they're drinking in countries around, cities and municipalities around the country. Now, again, people don't get it. When you're dealing with a flood, water's the last thing you're worried about having to concern yourself with as far as drinking. But drinking water is one of the biggest, if you will, the lack of drinking water or potable water outside of filtration, etc., becomes problematic. And so now we're dealing with a potential of 200,000 people. And I did get an email from a gentleman in Sacramento claiming that, the rains have stopped temporarily and they're working like mad, but that Sacramento at this point, I just got this 10 minutes ago, is not in danger of immediate evacuation. So that's from somebody who lives there, okay? But what we're trying to get across to everybody tonight is this is the lateness of the hour. You have a literal attempt of overthrowing the presidency of the United States. You have got many, many military people that know where all the goodies are that basically have been either compromised or bought off. Does anybody even worry that the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, Brennan, was a Muslim? Does anybody even worry that DHS, during all those years of the Obama terrorism presence in the United States, had access to everybody's records, whether you're in the military and the civilian population? So, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which will be the first to go when the order is given to them to start taking out people? And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I have lieutenant commanders, I have colonels, I have individual one-star generals and others. They're saying, Steve, help the people to understand what is at stake. So, Doug, I'm telling you this, when Office of Personnel Management lost 20 million names, they didn't lose them. Guess whose watch that happened on? Well, again, 'tis the season for treason was that way. But all these, and when I use the word bastards, I'm going to define it so you people think that, that's an offensive word, yet murdering babies and eating Christians is not offensive. The word bastard is what God literally calls the fallen angel offspring. And these are the people that are the rulers of this present darkness that are behind everything. And so as we're headed into the most giant spiritual, if you will, morass of evil, these bastards, and I'm talking about those who are in places of authority, are doing their best to bring down the United States. And look, I'm not the U.S. is perfect. I'm just saying this, that God gave us a reprieve, and during this reprieve, He is asking us right now, what are we going to do with what He gave us?